Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right. So what I'm going to do is provide you with an overview of this new technical report, Establishing Marine Protected Areas in a Changing Climate. And this report was developed collaboratively by IUCN's World Commission on Protected Areas, together with the International Partnership on MPAs, Biodiversity and Climate Change, and the United Kingdom's Joint Nature Conservation Committee. And this report helps countries, communities, and their partners connect and address both the biodiversity and climate crises by planning, designing, and implementing new MPAs and MPA networks that build climate resilience, adaptation, and mitigation. And this climate smart approach helps MPAs ensure that their benefits are lasting and equitable. I want to note that this guidance mentions marine protected areas, but it is relevant to all components of a network of protected and conserved areas, including MPAs, OECMs, or other effective conservation measures, and areas managed by Indigenous peoples or local communities. The report is also relevant to the climate adaptive management of existing MPAs, and it recognizes the broader context of marine spatial planning and ecosystem approaches to management within which networks of protected and conserved areas operate. Can I have the next slide? So MPAs play a critical role for mitigating climate change impacts by providing havens for marine life, promoting resilience, and enabling ecosystems to adapt to changing conditions. And this affects their ability to deliver ecological, social, and economic outcomes. Next slide. So the report describes 4 principles for establishing MPAs in a changing climate and helping to ensure the long-term success of the MPA. And these 4 principles are: understand change, strengthen adaptation and resilience, ensure equity and inclusivity, and generate holistic co-benefits. And the principles build on existing guidance for establishing protected and conserved areas. And they also align with the IUCN Green List standard that provides recognition for well-designed and managed protected or conserved areas. In the next few slides, I will describe each of these principles and its associated strategies that can be used to implement the principles. Then you'll also hear from a couple of speakers, as I mentioned, who are sharing the case studies about how these principles are applied in the creation of MPAs. Okay, next slide. So the first principle is to understand change. And that is described as understanding, modeling, and monitoring past, current, and future environmental, ecological, social, and cultural change to inform marine protected area planning and adaptive management. Developing this understanding during the design of an MPA allows a strong foundation for managers to incorporate adaptive measures and strategies into planning, policy, regulatory, and management processes that allow for adaptive and nimble responses to changing conditions. And this understanding is the basis for adaptive management. So this cycle that you see here is a climate smart planning cycle that shows how climate adaptation planning and adaptation can be used in natural resource management. And a key component of this is regular reassessments of resource condition and management actions so that we can continually evaluate how our actions are being responsive to climate impacts and what sorts of adjustments we may need to make. Next slide. Monitoring is foundational to, we need to understand past and present conditions in order to understand what changes are already happening and to tell us the causes of these changes. The design and designation process is an ideal time to establish baseline understanding of past and current conditions, and also to predict likely future conditions. The type of monitoring information collected should be tied to the goals and objectives of the MPA. And examples of types of data that may be relevant include time series data on key species populations, long-term ecological monitoring, census data, remote observational data, and information from Indigenous peoples and traditional knowledge. And biodiversity monitoring involves collecting data on features of conservation concern. This might include collecting data on species presence and abundance, as well as habitat extent and health, and features distribution over a geographic area. And some of the techniques that are used that are common are field surveys, satellite mapping, and acoustic mapping. It can be challenging to maintain monitoring systems. They're expensive, and often partnerships with universities and NGOs are a good way to obtain or supplement this information. Next slide. So another key component is predicting future changes. MPA managers need to understand future conditions and the impacts they may have on marine ecosystems and broader seascape level changes. So we can use tools like climate vulnerability assessments and scenario planning to understand and predict future conditions, including things like shifts in species, populations, habitats, and ecological communities, and the impacts of these changes on human activities and values. And different tools can be used to provide information at the appropriate spatial and temporal scales that are relevant to the MPA. Next slide. So I've mentioned monitoring and modeling, and some additional tools that I just wanted to mention that are really important for Principle 1 in terms of understanding change are to map biodiversity. So it allows us to see biodiversity when it's shown spatially by using geographic information system software, and lets us see the distribution of habitats and species. And this can really help us during the design and designation phase. We also can look at species distribution models to understand spatial patterns of biodiversity based on predictions of different environmental conditions. So for example, we can look at what biodiversity looks like under different climate scenarios, which are generated by climate models. So we have linked biological and geophysical models that can be used together to understand future species distributions under different scenarios. And then, of course, there are spatial tools for conservation planning, like MarkSan, that can help us evaluate the risks and trade-offs associated with different climate scenarios and help us set priorities. Next slide. So Principle 2 is to strengthen adaptation and resilience. And so the next few slides describe some aspects of how MPAs and MPA networks can strengthen adaptation and resilience. The next slide. So the first is to focus on establishing climate-informed goals. And what this means is that when we establish our new protected area, or OECM, we need to ask questions like, what habitats, ecosystem services, and features do you want to protect? How are they expected to change due to climate impacts? What types of management will be needed to sustain them? And we may need to think more about ecosystem function than solely about the continuance of certain species or habitats because of these fundamental changes in ecosystems that are occurring in our oceans. Next slide. We also need to think about MPA boundaries. And you'll be hearing more from the Parks Australia case study about this image of the Central Eastern Marine Park. But you can see, just in terms of the shape of the MPA, that it is designed to have north-south connectivity along the East Australian Current, and then also from the coastline out to the open ocean. So we have to ask questions when we're establishing boundaries, like, is the MPA large enough or connected enough to allow species range expansions? Does it include refugia? And are there compatible or incompatible uses within the proposed boundary or nearby? Next slide. We also need to bring in considerations that are used in any kind of network design, but are also important when we're bringing in a climate lens to the design of MPAs and networks. And so we need to be thinking about ecological connectivity, which is how species, propagules, and materials move through space and time. And this helps us enhance the adaptation and resilience of resources. So when we're thinking about ecological connectivity, we need to be thinking about large-scale MPAs, which are large enough to encompass different habitats for species of interest, which may not always be feasible, or networks that are designed to manage essential connectivity for ecosystems and their components. And this can include connections between the open ocean, the coast, and land-based species and ecosystems. Next slide. We also need to think about representativeness and replication, also key components of any MPA network. And this is a map of the state of California's MPA network, which was established specifically to include consideration of connectivity and also representativeness and replication. So representativeness ensures that MPAs protect all key habitats and species to support resilience and adaptation. And replication means that we're including multiple examples of each habitat type to safeguard against loss and promote recovery, so that if there is a catastrophic impact in one type of, for example, coral reef, a similar type of reef is protected elsewhere, so that those species are protected and can potentially reseed a larger area. Next slide. We also need to be thinking about protecting climate refugia. And refugia are areas that are expected to remain relatively shielded from the impacts of climate change over time, and where conditions may change more slowly than surrounding areas. And so by protecting these refugia, we may be able to buy time for species and habitats to adapt to changing conditions. And we can identify these areas using environmental proxies like microclimates, or ecosystem attributes, such as noticing areas where habitats are persisting due to those microhabitats, more microclimates. Next slide. We talked about protected and conserved areas, but we all recognize that these can take many years to establish, and yet we need to be responsive and nimble in the face of climate impacts that are causing impacts right now. And so dynamic measures can be a really important part of a network of protected and conserved areas, because they can be implemented more quickly and allow us to turn certain management measures on and off as different environmental conditions apply. So for example, there are dynamic measures in place to conserve endangered right whales in New England and in Canada, that complement permanent protected and conserved areas, but are more flexible and nimble and can be turned on when the whales are present and turned off when they are not present. Next slide. So the report summarizes 8 kinds of adaptation actions that can be implemented as part of a management plan, and are a good list of sort of umbrella categories that managers can think about. And they include alleviating climate impacts, for example, through shading, or helping to reduce acidification through having alkaline species that are habitats that increase alkalinity. The second is managing dynamic conditions, as I mentioned, thinking about how to, for example, move a coral nursery into deeper, cooler water in order to address a marine heat wave. The third is habitat protection. This can include protecting habitats from non-climate impacts, because by reducing non-climate stressors, we can help improve overall resilience. The fourth is active habitat and species recovery and restoration. The fifth is reducing human disturbance. The sixth is managing invasive species. And we have water quality management. And the last is promoting education. And education is really important, not only to target harmful human behaviors and try to change human behaviors within the MPA. For example, not standing on the coral or damaging the coral when you're visiting a site. But it also can help involve visitors, community members, and others in understanding how climate is changing an ocean or a particular place, and in being prepared to consider adaptive management that may mean that the site looks quite different in the future than it has in the past. And it's really important to help the public understand that managing for a changing ocean may require really difficult choices and ecosystems that look different than ecosystems have looked in the past. Next slide. So principle 3 is ensuring equitable and inclusive design. And this basically states that we need to ensure equitable and inclusive design and management in support of adaptation, resilience, and well-being of human communities, cultural practices, and values. Next slide. So the two components we're going to talk about are equity and inclusiveness. And equity encompasses fairness in sharing the burdens of climate change and ensuring that the impacts, costs, and benefits are distributed more equally across society. And recognition, acknowledgement, and respect for the rights and diversity of identities and values. So this can also include recognition of Indigenous peoples or of other rights holders and local communities. And equity also encompasses fair procedure in decision-making. So you can see here in this graphic that equality, everyone is standing on the same height bench, but they can't all reach the fruit because they're not all tall enough. Whereas equity accounts for the differences in people to help try to promote a more equitable outcome. Next slide. Inclusivity is important because it's vital to equitable design and can also lead to improved conservation outcomes. And so this really calls on managers and planners to ensure the early inclusion of diverse communities and peoples, particularly Indigenous peoples and underserved communities in decision-making processes. Next slide. Next slide. And the fourth principle is to consider holistic co-benefits. And this includes safeguarding and strengthening climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience co-benefits, while acknowledging the full spectrum of ecosystem services for people. Next slide. So when we think about co-benefits, one of the tools that managers and planners are going to need is to plan for multiple objectives, including climate objectives. And so we encourage planners to use participatory methods to establish goals. Now we can have the next slide. Thanks. So use those participatory measures so that everyone can participate and weigh the trade-offs and the potential wins between different objectives. Actually, can you go back one to Tanya? Using the best available evidence, including Indigenous and local knowledge, using mapping to inform decision-making can really help people all have a common frame of reference and a common set of information to work on together, and being transparent about the process and evidence used. Okay, next slide. We also are going to increasingly need to think about climate mitigation technologies and MPAs. We know that the coasts and the oceans are really important for renewable energy, but also for carbon dioxide removal. And so there's going to be a lot of interest in implementing these technologies, potentially in and around marine protected areas. So we need to ensure that these technologies do not detract from conservation objectives, and that we can use tools like regulatory impact analysis to identify conflicts and trade-offs and win-wins. And be intentional and transparent about what kinds of trade-offs we're making in allowing or not allowing these kinds of technologies. And finally, that these technologies are a part of a holistic approach to managing marine ecosystems that need to be considered. Next slide. So overall, our key findings in the report are that there's an urgency to include climate change in MPA planning as countries work toward the 2030 targets. that climate-informed planning is essential for effective long-term conservation of biodiversity, and that these 4 principles can help guide countries and network planning, that there are new opportunities for MPA networks through the High Seas Treaty, and these 4 principles can apply in the high seas as well as in national jurisdictions, and that best practices and learning are evolving, and there is a need for continued exchange among managers and policymakers and scientists in applying these kinds of concepts and sharing lessons learned. Next slide. So thank you. I will put my name in the chat if anyone needs to reach out. But meanwhile, I am happy to introduce Stefan Howe as the first case study author and presenter. And I will turn it over to you, Stefan.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, maybe next one, please, Tatiana. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for that sort of overview and introduction, Lauren. I'm going to be presenting a little bit on I'll provide a bit of context on the Australian marine parks and then focusing on a central eastern marine park case study. And this is building on a heap of work by many people. I just reference some of my colleagues in this slide, but also I want to acknowledge the significant contributions of CSIRO, Australia's National Science Agency, as well as the Yambundigai Wajah Aboriginal Corporation. And just want to start by acknowledging First Nations people of this country as the traditional owners, custodians and law keepers of the world's oldest living culture, and pay respects to their elders past and present, and to any First Nations people joining this call. I'm joining from Muwinina country in Hobart, way down the southern part of Australia, and also wanted to acknowledge the Yagal and Gumbaynggirr people whose sea country overlaps or adjacent to the Central Eastern Marine Park that we're talking about today. Next slide. Okay, so just a quick overview of the Australian marine parks. So there are 60 Australian marine parks that cover 3.8 million square kilometres, which is almost half of Australia's marine estate. You can't see it on this map, but there are 5 marine park networks in the Coral Sea Marine Park and Indian Ocean territories up in the top left of that diagram. The main objective of the marine parks is to protect and conserve natural, cultural and heritage values, but also allow for ecologically sustainable use. Each of the marine park networks in the Coral Sea have a management plan. Most of those commenced in 2018, so 5 of those are now coming up for review in 2026 to 28. Next. So yeah, that's just to highlight Central Eastern Marine Park, which is the case study we're talking about today, and that's in the Temperate East Marine Parks network. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we're coming up to the reviews of 5 of the plans, management plans. There'll be independent reviews of management, basically what we did in terms of management actions and so on. And then we're doing a separate piece of work on state of the marine parks, which is looking at the impact of management over the life of the plan. And that will include, amongst other things, looking backwards at the effects of climate change, but also modelling forwards what we can expect to see under different climate change scenarios. Next. And just to mention the different management programs. So there are 7 management programs for most of the marine parks management plans at the moment. I won't go through each of them, but I'll make reference to those later on in an example for Central Eastern. Next. So I just thought it might be useful to show some fairly recent results from the State of the Climate Report from last year, produced by CSIRO and the Bureau of Meteorology. You can see that this is looking at sea surface temperature in the Australian region from 1981 to 2023. And you can see that there's been a warming, with the greatest warming occurring down off the southeast of Australia and Tasmania. And that extends sort of up towards the Central Eastern Marine Park as well. Next. And this one just shows the ocean heating that sort of occurs from, I think it's down to about 2,000 metres, and The southern hemisphere's oceans have taken up the majority of ocean heat from global warming. And you can see that it's really affected the Southern Ocean along the south of Australia and sort of around New Zealand and up the east coast of Australia, and including around Central Eastern Marine Park. Next. Thanks. So what's Parks Australia doing about it? Well, we take an adaptive approach to managing the parks. On the left, you can see the Director of National Parks climate change statement that includes 6 principles, 2 of them that are particularly relevant to the guidelines that have been launched recently, one of which is that we manage for both persistence and change, and that we integrate consideration of climate change into mainstream management. You can see that graphic on the right, which is just from the US National Park Service Resist, Accept, Direct framework, which is a tool for decision makers to make informed, purposeful and strategic choices in a changing climate. And Resist is largely about sort of maintaining or restoring systems as they are or have been, which is really about stationarity. And then Accept is allowing ecosystems to change in response to climate, largely autonomously. And then the third action, Direct, is recognising that there will be irreversible change for some systems, so it's trying to actively shape that change towards a more positive outcome rather than a less positive or more negative one. Next. And just a bit of exciting news for us. Anyway, last week or a couple of weeks back, there's a new climate change adaptation project between Parks Australia and CSIRO, and my colleague Nicholas McGregor is leading that with Mick Dunlop from CSIRO and a bunch of others. So that's looking at climate change adaptation across terrestrial and marine realms. Next, thanks. So this is just a schematic of the East Australian Current, which is the major ocean current of the South Pacific Ocean and controls the ocean environment of the marine ecosystem along the east coast of Australia. It's a boundary current, and because of its broad geographic reach, it affects climate and marine environment along much of the east coast of Australia, which is where the majority of, or over half of Australia's population lives. And the Western Tasman Sea, so down in the southeast, along the east coast of Australia, is warming faster than the global average. Next, thanks. So just getting onto the Central Eastern Marine Park case study. So that, as Lauren mentioned before, you can see that there's an east-west arm of the park and a north-south arm. The park is 30 kilometres off the coast, east coast of Australia, and goes out across the continental shelf, and it's very large. It's more than 70,000 square kilometres and a huge depth range down to 6,000 metres. It includes a sort of fairly unique biodiversity because it's got habitat species and communities from 3 different biogeographic provinces. It includes 3 key ecological features, including canyons. I'll just ask you to make note of that because I'll talk about Solitary Canyon in a minute. Seamount chains and fronts and eddy fields. And it's also adjacent to the sea country of the Yagal and Gumbaynggirr people. And you can see that there are 3 zone types in this park. There's a national park zone, which is IUCN 2, high level of protection. Then there's habitat protection, excuse me, which as the name suggests, protects the seafloor. And then you have multiple use zone. You can see in that small western section of that east-west arm, and that allows for a range of different uses while also having conservation objectives. Next, thanks. So before many of the Australian marine parks were established, there was a lot of work done to feed into the bioregional planning and planning for each of the marine park networks. So this is just an example from a report that CSIRO developed looking at projected movement of water masses down the east coast of Australia. You can see there are sea surface temperature models from the late 90s and then again another projection out to the 2060s. Seasons 1 through to 4, just summer through to spring. The key takeaway from this graphic, though, is that if you have a look at the warm waters, you can see they're moving further south between the sort of 90s and the 2060 projections. Next. So this is, you can see on the left there, there's a black-spined urchin, Centrocephalus rogersii. That's a native to the east coast of Australia, but through climate change over the last 2 to 3 decades, that's expanded its range south and become fairly invasive, and it's had huge impacts on biodiversity and shallow rocky reefs. And then there's some more, you can see some more model outputs from that report that I mentioned. We'll just ask you to have a look at those closed and open circles, so that they show the open circle is the main position of future habitat bands out in the 2060s, and the closed circle was the current habitat band or distribution. So you can see the habitats are moving south over that sort of as part of that future projection up to the 2060s, which we're seeing in real time. Next, thanks. So just wanted to say a bit about the traditional owners. So the Central Eastern Marine Park is adjacent to sea country of the Yagal and Gumbaynggirr peoples, and it's part of the world's oldest ongoing culture, and sea country for First Nations people is valued for cultural identity, health and well-being. And the Yagal and Gumbaynggirr traditional owners continue to share their oral history traditions that have retained information about previous climate change events or climate events. Next, thanks. So I'll talk a little bit now about a recent collaboration between Parks Australia and CSIRO and First Nations people, and focusing on the Solitary Canyon, which is one of the canyons in Central Eastern Marine Park. And if you think back to the earlier slide on the different management programs, this project was a co-design project, largely led by Rob McKinnon and my colleague who's on this call, with CSIRO and traditional owners for the Solitary Canyon. And in terms of management, it involved permitting, authorisations processes, considered the needs of First Nations peoples through opportunities to participate, sorry, and be involved in co-design, undertaking science and park protection knowledge building, and opportunities to communicate outcomes and also think about management implications. So the project involved, amongst other things, exploring the EAC's interaction with deep canyon systems, in this case Solitary Canyon, and the potential role it plays in driving upwelling of cool and nutrient-rich waters, in physical environments for the marine park and inshore waters. Next. And this is a schematic that was developed by University of Queensland and CSIRO that just shows how the ocean currents and canyon interactions drive upwelling of cooler water from the deep areas, sort of 6,000 metres off the continental shelf, up into the shallower coastal environment. Next, thanks. So in terms of current and future research projects, my counterparts and Parks Australia staff are supporting ongoing research with science partners and First Nations peoples, and research continues to provide valuable information to help inform management, including, like we just talked about, the role of the Solitary Canyon in channeling colder nutrient-rich waters up into the shelf, providing baseline information that allows assessment of condition and future trend and condition assessments, such as the high levels of biodiversity in the Solitary Canyon, developing of modelling from research that can help to forecast climate futures, and also recognising and valuing Indigenous knowledge and science, and the importance of co-design research and cooperative projects to inform climate change adaptation. Next, thanks. And just want to finish up by again thanking our science partners at CSIRO, Alistair Hobday, Bernadette and Chris Chapman, and also thanking Nathan Brennan, who's from the Yambundigai Wajar Aboriginal Corporation. It's a lot of this latter work in particular has been a close collaboration between park staff and some of these partners and rights holders. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Stefan. That was great. And if people have any questions for Stefan, please feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat. We are going to come back and have questions and discussion after we've heard from our next case study presenter. So please do go ahead and share those questions or comments. And now I am happy to turn it over to Purwanto from the Coral Triangle Center. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning from Ambon in Maluku in eastern part of Indonesia. And thank you again, Lauren, for this opportunity to share our works in Islands MPA that we are works. Next slide. Yes, just want to highlight this map that I'm sure most of you are familiar with this map, which show the coral triangle region, the area with the highest coral reef and marine biodiversity. This region is home to more than 600 species of coral reefs. Next, please. And the Airun is next. Located in the middle of this coral triangle regions, and it's a very remote islands and consists of 11 small islands. Next, including the active volcanic islands, we call it Gunung Api, which erupted in 1998, and the lava is covered and destroyed almost of coral reefs in eastern part of the area. But there is a very quick recovery. Today, the lava flow is the highest coral covers in this area and very famous for diving and snorkeling. And it's about 20,000 people live in 18 villages in this area. And the island is very famous with the spices like nutmeg and also local cultures. And during the colonial era, the Rhode Islands was traded for Manhattan and New York by the England and Dutch. And currently, there are there are 3 conservation area in this area: this Hatta Islands and the Banda Marine Tourism Parks and Airun MPA. Next. And next slide, please. This is the marine biodiversity in Airun and Banda Island MPAs. There's a high biodiversity of coral reefs, few mangroves, seagrasses, turtles, and very important area for cetaceans. The area is identified as nursery and also social area for the blue whale, the biggest whale in the world. Next. Next, please. But the similar. Next slide, please. Yeah, similar with the mostly small island in Indonesia. And Rhode Island MPA facing some coastal development plus and also climate change. Next. And this MPAs include the IUCN category seat, which because we manage with multi-use zone, not only a protected area, but also this is about 60 million hectares and established in 2021 and managed with multi-use zone, include the core zones, fisheries utilization, and other zones. Next, please. And CTC is support the development process of Airun MPA. it's a quite long process to develop the MPA in Indonesia, include the iron. We focus work in this area is about 3 or 4 years before the MPA established by Ministry of Marine and Fisheries Ministry in Jakarta in 2021. We are start with the collecting data of ecological, socioeconomic, biophysical, and then analyze and also conduct with series of community meeting and public consultation in the different level from the villages, sub-district, district, and provincial governments. We also are working with the academia and another stakeholders in this. Next slide, please. And in developing the MPA zoning system, we considered also climate change factors like as Lauren mentioned before, is about the replication and representative of critical habitats, and also local wisdom and resilient factors that upwelling area and also local wisdom in this area that also Stefan mentioned in the previous presentation. Next slide, please. We involved the local community in the establishment process of MPA, included in the collecting data, development of zoning and management plan, and a long process of community meeting and public consultation in the villages until the province and central government, include with active input from the academia and other relevant stakeholders. It's quite a long process. Next, please. We also support in the management implementation of the MPA, included the routine surveillance and monitoring resource utilizations, and support the local community surveillance groups to do surveillance in their own area. Next slide, please. And capacity building is one of the key success in development of MPAs in Indonesia and Iron, because once the local community know about the MPA, what is the goals, what is the benefit of the MPA, this MPA, they comply with MPA zoning regulations because they feel they involved in the process of the development. It's why we also support the local community MPA managers, stakeholders with some training related with the MPA, like sustainable fisheries, surveillance and monitoring, and other topics of the trainings. Next, please. And next slide. The coral reefs in this area is one of the conservation target in Airun and Banda Island MPA, and we support it with the regular coral reef monitoring as part of the requirement for measurement of the management effectiveness. And this is shown that the coral reef and that area is quite stable. And next, please. And we also support with the annual MPA management effectiveness evaluations with Indonesian tools called EVICA. And last year, the Airun Island MPA is in the optimally managed status. But the evaluation also came up with the management recommendation to increase the effectiveness of the MPA. Like this is some recommendation from last year evaluations, like develop and strengthen the management unit, develop some standard operating procedures and so on. And we will do evaluation again this year soon. Next slide, please. And community awareness and education program will we also included with the local and youth people in this area, schools, and we also developed like outreach and education materials such as posters, banner, billboards, and also video to show their marine resources and to gain their knowledge and support of the MPA. Next slide, please. And on 2022 until 2024, 2 years, we support with the pilot project to assess the stock and status of the fisheries. We developed the pilot project with the deep sea snappers and grouper fisheries in that area. We collaborated with the fishermen to record with take a picture of all of their catch, and also we inputted all the data of fisheries to the database, and from this study we know that where is their fishing ground, and then also we analyze more deeper to know about the status of the fisheries. And most of the fisheries, especially for deep sea snapper and fisheries, is in the overexploited level. So we are now we share the data with fishermen, with the government, and now we will take action together to try to recover and improve the fisheries in this area. Next slide, please. And plastic pollution is one threat and challenges in this MPA, and it's why we are also working with the local community, women group, and other stakeholders to dealing with plastic pollution in the MPAs. We support the one local community group, one woman group in this Iron MPA who have like enthusiasts and routine to do plastic pollution and also waste management in that area. Next slide, please. And in the implementation program in Iron MPA, we also consider gender and social inclusions. We included all stakeholders to involve in the process of in the planning, in the development process, and also in the management of MPA. And we did the survey about gender and social inclusion in Banda to determine JC factors, and we hope the all stakeholders can involve the management of the MPA. We hopefully can increase the management effectiveness of the MPA. Next slide, please. We also consider like local community wisdoms. I think Stefan already mentioned in previous presentations, and during the planning process, the development and implementation of the MPA, we understand that the community in the Airun and Banda Island is familiar with the SASI. SASI is the traditional management open and close harvesting system of marine resources during some periods in certain area, and it is in line with the conservation value. So we try to revive and practice to support practice of SASI and incorporate the SASI location into the MPA zoning system. This is have got a positive response from the community and support conservation effort within the MPA. And last year we collaborated with the BRIN, Indonesian Research Institute, to conduct research on SASI and marine tenurial system in Maluku and Papua, and we hopefully we can, with this local wisdom, can support the MPA that's like a modern conservation approach. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is shown that when local community during ceremony, open and close session, they put the sign so another community know about that. Next slide, please. And some lesson learned from Irun development process and also implementation process, that community involvement is a key of MPA management success and effective. And then capacity building also must be conducted to strengthen, to provide the local community and other stakeholders with the understanding of MPA objective and understanding of the MPA benefits. And when they understand, they will support, they fully support the implementation of MPA. Also integrating local wisdom like SASI into the MPA management, I think this is quite good practices, because community feels and sense of ownership of the MPA because they feel the MPA also accommodate SASI, the rules, local wisdom that they are familiar with. And adaptive and inclusion and zoning management plan development and implementation. One local community involved, and once again they know about the objective benefit, and they will be very supportive in implementing the MPA management. I think this is all from me, and thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Purwanto, and thank you, Stefan, both of you. Those were great case studies and great to think about how local MPAs are doing their planning, thinking ahead and considering the changing ocean conditions due to climate change. So I'd like to just open up the floor and see if people would like to share any comments or questions in the chat. We'd also love to hear from you if you are involved in an MPA that is addressing climate issues. And you want to share that in the chat, that would be great as well. We'd love to learn more. We are hoping to add some additional case studies over the coming year so that we can grow the number of examples and opportunities to learn from different sites that are working on these issues. So maybe while we see if people want to add anything to the chat, or you can also raise your hand, and I think we can unmute you. I have one question for both of our case study presenters, which is, how do you think the communities that were involved in the planning processes thought about climate change as you all were engaged in these processes? Did they seem very informed, very concerned? What were some of the issues that they brought to the table that you had to address in the planning process? So maybe, Stefan, I'll put you on the spot first, and then see, Purwanto, if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, look, I don't want to put my colleague on the spot, but there's possibly still on this call was doing more of the engagement with the traditional owner communities, but not in terms of the planning, but sort of engagement in science projects. So look, but a general sort of comment is that one of my colleagues was also saying that First Nations communities in Australia sort of often say that climate change is one of their greatest concerns. That's across terrestrial and marine. And thanks, Rob, we popped up. I don't know if you want to say anything about your engagement with First Nations in Central Eastern and beyond.
Yeah, well, with the Gambang, they're particularly interested. One of the other projects I've worked on them with is a seasonal calendar, like collecting cultural knowledge about the marine environment over through the year. and they rely a lot on indicator species for like different activities. And their observations are that the indicator species are, things are changing, the times of year and the influences. So they are quite concerned. Just their ecological knowledge is like showing that things are changing to what their old histories and mapping and that have told them in the past. I guess they do have. I think Stefan referred to this in his talk, and I think in the actual document there's some references and links to like stories, like cultural knowledge that's still existing. Like there's oral history, there's dances that relate to like previous changes in sea level and stuff. So there is a lot of ecological knowledge and knowledge around climate change and previous climate events. So yeah, they are particularly interested and keen to be involved. And we did pick up with the bathymetry mapping on the shelf, evidence of remnant coastlines and that sort of stuff. So the community is really interested in those aspects.
Great, thank you, Rob. Purwano, is there anything you'd like to share about the sort of community perspectives?
Yeah, and Airun and Banda Island is very remote island. So especially when we are there, the local community is they feel that like the climate is weather is changing, but some people, some local community said that, oh, this is like as usual. But when we are digging, we are discuss more deep with the local community and digging more depth, and they feel that oh, this is the climate change, and we give like not only training, but also we discuss with them, give knowledge with them, and then we also mapping when we are develop the zoning system, we consider that this area is more resilient because like upwelling, there is the coral reef with have a score value from the resilience factors. And when we are discuss with the community, they know about that. They know the science, background science, and they support it with the zoning system with the like that. So, but some fishermen, some local communities sometimes don't believe or don't know yet about the changing. This like they feel, oh, this is like as usual. This, but when we are discuss with them, when give knowledge, give training, they know about that, and then they support to manage the climate change impact in that MPAs. I think that's Lawrence.
All right, you're on mute.
Thank you. I was just going to note that there's a question in the chat, Purwano, for you as well, which is what thresholds of change in reefs and fisheries health are used to invoke SASI closures?
Once again, Lauren?
Yes, so what thresholds of change or what types of indicators in fisheries and reefs are used to invoke SASI closures? What sorts of information goes into the decision to close using the SASI?
Yeah. The SASI is actually this local community wisdom. They close the area based on the marine bioton that important for them. Like they close they close harvesting lobster and snails, trochus, and some fish in some areas. Some areas have a different, some community have different sassy biota and also sea cucumbers, and they close it some 1 or 2 years, and then they harvest it. So actually, not in the sassy practices, not considered yet about the coral reefs and another habitats. It's mostly the sassy is for the biota, marine biota that have a high value for local community. They believe to recover their marine biota. Like that in Airun, I think it also practices another part of eastern part of Indonesia, like Maluku and Papua in eastern part of Indonesia. Thanks, Laura.
Lauren, you are
Thank
muted.
you. Thank you. Are there any other questions people have? Yeah, and Sharifa says, thank you very much, Pak Purwanto. She appreciates your answer. Any other questions, or would you like to raise your hand or unmute yourself if others have questions or comments?
I jump into the question for Purwanto, if that's okay.
Yeah, please do.
It's sort of related to, well, it's related to climate change, but in the context of broader management as well. Because I was curious about the different scores you had for inputs, outputs, and outcomes, and so on, and really curious about how you generated those and how you factor in effects of climate change when considering those scores. Yeah, that looked really interesting.
Did you do you need Stefan to repeat that, Purwanto, or did you get that?
Yes, sorry, I cannot clear. Heavy raining here, so the Stefan, what again? Sorry.
It was just a scoring system that you had. I can't remember the acronym, but you had percentage scores for inputs, outputs, outcomes, and so on in one of your slides, which looked like it was like a management effectiveness sort of rating or score. So I was just curious about how you came up with those and how you factor climate change into those scoring systems. Because I think, yeah, one of the things I think that we share, or a challenge that we share, and the world is where things are changing, and in terms of outcomes and condition and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's from the Indonesian effectiveness MPA management evaluations. I think there is input, output, outcome, and the impact factors. And there is some of the actually not included directly about the climate change, but some factors like the increasing or condition of coral reefs, like fish biomass, and then conservation target. The area is scores in the implementation one. Like if input is about the management's from the management, and then input and output and outcome is from the implementation, the result of implementation, but actually not direct of the climate change factor like that. But this is some of the scores is generated to related to climate change, like that, Stefan. There is so many. I think the four indicator have so many questions. Is about 70 or something question that some of climate change related to climate change also score it about that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Stefan, there's actually a question for you. It's asking in the Great Barrier Reef, and I don't know if you can speak to this, or maybe if you can't, maybe someone else on the call can. But in the Great Barrier Reef MPA, how are the octocorals? I'm not even going to try and say the Latin name. Hyopora corulea in the shallow areas being affected and being conserved in the face of climate and high sea surface temperature. And I don't know if these.
Yeah. Oh, Helioptera. Yeah. Look, that's a very good question. I'm not able to answer it. Sorry, Sharif. It's a little bit complicated. Parks Australia, who I work for, manages other marine parks, and the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park is managed by a different authority. So we sort of stay in touch with them, but I'm not familiar with the science to the extent where I could sort of answer a question around Helioptera, but we'd certainly touch with someone.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just me, but Stefan, I think you've frozen up here for a moment. But Sharifa, I think we may be able to connect you with someone at Great Barrier Reef if Stefan was offering. So thanks.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Things people want to share about what they're working on at your local MPA or in your programs or your research? All right, well then I think we will go ahead and wrap up. I just want to thank our two speakers, Stefan and Toronto, and our excellent support team, Pablo and Tatiana, and all of you for coming and listening. And we hope that you'll stay involved in sharing ideas in the future. We may be reaching out, like I said, to learn about other case studies and continue to try to promote this exchange across programs. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Lauren.